Thank you for joining us. My name is Zainab and I'm from the Arizona Department of Water Resources. I'll talk to you today a little bit about water use and water conservation, specifically how it pertains to HOAs. And I know your syllabus said something like drought preparedness. I think learning all this information would really make you more drought prepared by knowing how you can actually conserve, not only specifically in drought, but in every day of the year. So we're going to cover these points. As I said, going to talk about water management and use in Arizona, and specifically in HOAs, and what some of the water conservation practices that everybody can implement in their own HOAs. So just to give you a quick breakthrough of when water management started in Arizona, back in 1980s, a group of leaders, water legislators, and managers have came together to create the 1980s Groundwater Management Act. What it did, it created the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and it created several goals to help control severe groundwater depletion. A few of the goals were to create active management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas. Active management areas are AMAs. And also in these specific areas where most people and most water was used, these is the areas that groundwater was mostly severely depleted, there were more regulations for water users. So for example, one of the regulations that is to file an annual water use report every year for the previous years, which HOAs also are a part of the water users that need to provide these annual reports. So those were a little bit breakthrough of state regulations and state water management. Each local city and local town have their own local ordinances put in place. I'm just going to mention a few examples of what is out there. A lot of cities, if not all of them, actually restrict the waste of water. So not to water your streets and pavements. They really don't need the water. It's mainly to the plain, or it should go to the plain. So there are some restrictions. Another example can be the time of day that you actually water. So some cities would ask you to water only between dusk to dawn. Just an example I think you would like to know, the Montana State University has done a research and they found out that in a very hot and windy day, and we do have a lot of these in Arizona, you could waste up to 50% of your sprinkler water just due to evaporation. So you can just save all of these water wasted just by watering between dusk and dawn. And there's many other regulations. Just refer to your cities or town to get the full list. So we talked about some state regulations, some local regulations. This is a graph that shows how Arizona managed its water use and what was the water use between 1957 to 2013, comparing to our population growth and gross domestic income. So unfortunately, the laser doesn't work, but you can see that the orange line is our population. We have had, our population grew sixfold in this time period. Our gross domestic income has actually increased 19-fold, while our water consumption had reduced in 100,000 acre feet. One thing that is nice to see, and you could look at more or less in the 1980s, that's where our water consumption has started to really decline. And you can connect it to several things. One of them, of course, is the 1980s Groundwater Management Act that helped a lot in managing this groundwater depletion. And also a lot of technologies in irrigation that came to play around this time. So you can see there were a lot of successes in Arizona water management. However, thinking about wanting to provide a sustainable water future, especially when our population is going to grow, our economy, of course, we want it to go and grow. We want to make sure, and with some environmental uncertainties, we want to make sure that we manage it the best way possible. So, talking a little bit about drought. Since 1999, the state has been in declared drought. Now, some expert actually says that since '96 we are in drought, and this is only the current condition as of October 13. And one specific thing I want to mention, currently more than 62% of our state is in some sort of drought. And 3 months ago, before the monsoon season started, you can see that about 3/4 of the state were in drought, and a quarter of the whole state was in severe drought as of July And it's right 3 months ago, it's right somewhere in the middle. You can see 24.56% was in severe drought in July. So again, we did a great job in managing our water. We want to make sure we are still managing it as the best, the most efficient way we can, especially with some environmental uncertainties. So talking specifically about HOAs. HOA is an industrial facility, you hopefully all know. And this is just the pie chart to the left. Breaks down to you all the different sectors of industrial facilities. And you can see that turf-related facilities, which HOAs again are considered, using 35% of the total of industrial facilities. So we're going to talk specifically about turf-related facilities. Looking to the graph on the right, I'll try to do it as simply as possible. It's pretty much water application efficiencies by the different subsectors of turf facilities. So you can see that parks, for example, use about 4.1 acre-feet of water per acre of land. HOAs use an average 3.2 acre-feet of water per acre of land, and school use 2.37. So just to give you a breakthrough or a little comparison. So you can see HOAs are doing, go ahead, sir.
When you talk HOAs, that also includes ones that have golf courses, or is the golf courses in an HOA counted separately?
That's a great question. They are usually counted separately. Let me actually take this moment and introduce Ryan Jakish right here. He's our industrial facility specialist, and he's here to really answer specific questions that you have regarding regulations for HOAs. And we'll provide both of our information at the end, or you can ask any question that you want at the end, and we'll be happy to answer. But please feel free also to ask during the talk. We'll be happy to answer this as well. So as you can see, HOAs are doing much better than parks and golf courses, which is great, and they're doing a good job. However, there is room for improvement. Let's say schools are using more or less almost a full acre-feet less than HOA, so there is always room for improvement. And a lot of this improvement can come from water conservation. Go ahead, sir.
Could you define acre-feet?
Acre-feet of water is, think about a whole acre of land and think about a depth of a feet, and whatever fills that area would be an acre-feet of water.
Is that annual?
This is annual, correct. Thank you for clarifying that. So I'll mention several water conservation practices that you may heard about, you may want to learn a little more. I'm going to give a few examples, but I really want to encourage some conversation. If you guys implemented some water conservation practices within your HOAs or have some example of successes or even challenges, I would love to know. I'm sure some of your friends around the crowd would also love to know, so please feel free to let me know. Go ahead, sir.
For turf, that means grass only? And in some cases,
Specifically in the word, we actually mean high water use landscape. Turf seem to be the most common high water use landscape, but that's another good question. It really means any plant that uses a lot of water.
But a lot of HOAs in this area, we have some grass areas, and then we have some kind of desert with some plants that we may still water, right?
Yes, yes, very true, and we're going to talk about this.
So when it does those numbers, it doesn't distinguish between what part is grass and what part is desert landscaping?
Correct. Now, are we talking about the last graph that we talked about? It does not, and that's a good point. It actually just measures what is the size of the land of an HOA or all the HOAs, and that's how it divides. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons maybe why schools are using less, and they may have more efficient irrigation, but they also may have more desert xeriscape or desert landscape around. So that's another way. And we're going to talk about all of these, or hopefully most of these. So talking about different practices for water conservation, we'll talk about xeriscape. That's plainly low water use landscape. A lot of people think xeriscape is xeroscape, which means a lot of gravel and rocks. However, xeriscape can be very beautiful, very lush, very colorful. It just happened to take much less water to grow. Now, Personally, I wouldn't really recommend the zero scape because using a lot of rocks and a lot of gravel would actually increase the heat island effect in your community. You may not want to do that in Arizona. So that's just something to consider. So as this gentleman mentioned before, this is just a breakthrough seeing, comparing, and contrasting turf or high water use landscape to low water use landscape or xeriscape. You can see that high water use landscape can use more than 3 times as much water for the same amount of land as low water use landscape would use, such as xeriscape. And again, I'm not talking about rocks, I'm really talking about a lush, colorful landscape of plants that use less water. So beside the fact that it used much less water, of course, it would also cost you much less to maintain. There is many other reasons why to convert to xeriscape. And let me actually just take a moment, and before, I do want to mention that we don't necessarily say replace all of your turf, but why not use turf only in areas where they are actually utilized by families, by pets, not necessarily all over the landscape, and that would help you mitigate some of these water use and some of these costs. So some of the reasons, I may touch just on a few, but if you want, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards about many others. It requires much less maintenance. There is really not a lot of mowing, barely any pruning and anything like that. You would use all the organic matter, the leaf litter, you'll just leave it on the ground. It would actually help you also conserve water because it would shade the ground and will prevent some evaporation. Another thing is that you would support native wildlife. Who doesn't like birds and hummingbirds and butterflies? It's always nice to see for your residents, for yourself. It adds some colors and many other users. Talking about chemicals, because they're accustomed to our desert landscape or to desert soils, they don't necessarily need a lot of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. You would save the money that comes with it and also spreading all these chemicals to the air and to our waterways. So you'll prevent this, also improve the health and the quality of your air in your community. And maybe one of the most important, or to me it's really important, is that you really set an example by converting to xeriscape. You share with everybody who is there how beautiful our landscapes can be. It doesn't have to be all green. It can be so colorful and diverse. And you reap all these benefits in the process. So it can sometimes get a little costly. However, there's many resources available out there for you. Some rebates that would help you. Mesa, for example, offer up to $10,000 for you to convert from turf to xeriscape. A lot of free programs. And Gilbert is a good example. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how much they conserve, because it's really amazing. So they have a program that help residents manage their irrigation better and look at their landscape. And they already helped HOAs within the city to save about 253 million gallons. So that's a lot only in one city. And you can tap into these savings if you wanted to. There's also maybe another great example, maybe the best. There's many free demonstration gardens of xeriscape around there. And you can maybe in a lazy afternoon take your stuff, cruise around, get inspired by xeriscape, get some ideas for what you would like to implement. And they're all free for everybody to enjoy them. And of course, there are many other resources. I may mention a few of these brochures. And I'll show you a little bit later how they look, but they're also all available under this website, which you got a little record of that, so you can refer to it through that. Now, these brochures are really great because they take you from choosing the plants that you want that use less water, how to design your landscape in a way that would look beautiful and appealing, and also how to maintain it afterwards. So moving on to low-impact development, or you may have heard the term, it's called also green infrastructure. And this is something to consider more when you're thinking about renovating your grounds or just doing new constructions. A few examples of low-impact development would be curb cuts. So instead of letting the water, the storm water, just go through the street, through the road, and go straight to the sewer, you can create some curb cuts and create little rain gardens that the water would accumulate there and make your landscape a little nicer, a little colorful, and you wouldn't need to water it. It would just rely on water, storm water alone. Another way is to use permeable materials. Again, not necessarily concrete and pave all of your roads to create some permeable material so the water would accumulate. And also, if you see in this picture, whatever is not penetrating would actually go to water the plants down the slope. So implementing some of these low impact development principles may require us to change a little bit of the conventional thought that our planting bed should be higher than the streets, because what happened in that case, it pretty much just automatically sheds all the water away again to our streets and to our sewers. If we were to make our planting beds as a basin shape or in a more concave shape where the water would actually be encouraged to enter the beds and be utilized by the plants, we are actually getting many benefits out of it. And one of them is, think about all the water that we could use going to the sewer, and then we get our water from the utility all the way from a far away treatment plant to get back to our plant. It's a lot of waste of energy altogether throughout this system. That being said, plants really love the rainwater, and it has a lot of great minerals that are stripped whenever, most of the time, they would be stripped in our municipalities' water and our utility water. So you actually help your plants to really look great just by using the rain instead of treated water from our water facilities. So talking a little bit about rainwater harvesting, I just want to point out the differences between passive and active system. So some people think, oh, rainwater harvesting, I'll just put a tank next to my gutter and collect the water. This is actually called active system because it does require somebody to manually open the valve and move the hose to where the plants are. So somebody really needs to do something with this water in order for it to work. A passive system is a system where you actually create the landscape in a way that would collect the rainwater. You also plant the plants that would absorb this water. And you, as the person who owned this system, you wouldn't really need to do a whole lot. It would function by itself whenever it rains. So it's called a passive system. Now, it's a much cheaper system to construct, and it's much easier to maintain. And again, if you choose native plants, because they're accustomed to our precipitation patterns, they most time would not even need supplemental irrigation after it's been established, only in very long periods of dryness. Anybody has any questions so far? Awesome. So moving on to landscape practices, you may be able to say, okay, I want to convert to xeriscape, I want to implement maybe low impact development, but ultimately it would be the landscapers who would choose your plants, who would maintain them, who plant them, and who will take care of your landscape. So one really important point that I want to stress out, that you want to make sure that your landscapers know what they're doing. It's really important because if a plant dies, it would require so much more efforts and money and water to plant another one and to let it establish. So it's a really good thing to remember. This is just one example, and you do have in the front a brochure that sends you to a website called SmartScape. This is a program for landscape professionals that teaches them. It's by the U of A, the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension here in Phoenix. They're also having Tucson one, and they teach landscapers how to maintain desert landscape, how to operate the irrigation the most efficiently possible. So you could actually get a list of all the people who graduated in this link over there and through this brochure that you got, or the little piece of paper. Go ahead.
One question for some of the people that are here. We've experienced this year 30 to 40% higher water bill. The rate hasn't gone up because the reason given is the usage is so hot in the summer. Is that, other people have the same experience, or do you think we have problems other than it's too hot?
Anybody experience something similar? I tell you what can happen. Sometimes there are leaks that we're not necessarily aware of, and it's not necessarily upground like an irrigation. You just pop out and you can see it. Sometimes it's underground, so sometimes we're not aware of this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about irrigation. Oh, thanks. Thank you. About irrigation efficiencies. I'll go a little back. Is that okay like that? Yes. Awesome. So I'll talk a little bit about irrigation efficiencies afterwards and all the resources that are available. So talking again about landscaper practices, it's really important to establish what's your expectations of your landscapers and of your landscape. I just mentioned a few do and don'ts that I think it's important for you to look out and see in your landscape. The 4 main don'ts is do not top, do not shear, do not strip, and do not overplant. Not only that it, to me, looks really not healthy and not pretty, again, it would cause your plants to die much faster, and you would have to invest much more money and much more energy to replace it and to let it establish. So those are really, really important considerations.
Do trees need to be watered at all?
Sorry, sir?
Trees like mesquites?
That's a good question. Again, it depends. First of all, almost every plant, if not every plant, need to be irrigated at the first couple of years to be established. Trees, especially because they have a vaster root system, and that's again if you encourage it through the irrigation that you implement, a lot of time would not require, because again, if you use native plants, that's another thing really important to mention. Native plants are accustomed, native trees are accustomed to have a lot of roots out there to harvest as much rain as they can, like they do in the desert. So you wouldn't, most of the time you would not need to supplement, irrigate them after establishment of a couple or several years. It will be a different case with plants that are not native. Some of the do's that you should look in your landscape and make sure that your landscapers are implementing is really simply plant the right plant in the right place. It seems very logical, however, a lot of times it doesn't happen. So if, let's say, you have your sign, you don't want it to be blocked, of course, your landscape may put a tree that is a little now, but in 5 years it will cover your sign and would just require constant maintenance. Why not just to plant a shrub instead that would not grow as far? And that would, again, save you the money, save you the water and all that involved. Use mulch and organic matter is really, really important, again, to encourage healthy of soil. It actually brings a lot of microorganisms, and this is what break down the nutrients and minerals and let your plants use them. Beside the fact that it would shade your soil and prevent a lot of evaporation and water loss due to it. And finally, we did talk about use irrigation efficiently, and we're going to talk about this in the next few slides because it is an important topic. So, as we said, up to 50% of water can be lost in the landscape. This is just a few simple, easy and free things that you can do in your landscape. One, as we said, we talked about water in between dusk to dawn. Don't water during the day and you'll save a lot of water. Shut off irrigation after the rain. That seems like that should be the thing to do. The plants would get the water. They don't need extra water. They would just not take it. So some of these are free. There are 2 in the bottom that may cost money, but you'll be surprised how quick you may get your return on investment just by saving of water. So installing smart irrigation controller, for example, saved 1 HOA in Chandler. They actually used 50% less water just by installing smart irrigation controller. They also called weather controller because they would sense the moisture of your soil and the temperature, and they will just irrigate according to it. And of course, identifying and fixing leaks is a big part of it. Now, that could get costly, but there are a lot of resources available out there for you to utilize. As we said, we talked a little bit about rebates that are available. There's also free programs. For example, some cities will come to your HOA, would see what your landscape water should be and what it is, and find the discrepancies in between. So that's something you want to refer to your cities. And there are ample free classes out there that are available either for Scape or for smart controllers and other irrigation efficiencies that you may want to look at. And as I understood, this presentation will be available for you, so you don't necessarily have to take all the notes. It would be there for you to use. And of course, implementing some of these, one really, really great way to do is inspire residents to do the same, to conserve in their home. There is a great resources out there. This is the Smart Home Water Guide. It helps people to find, identify, and fix leaks within their homes. And very simple, very easy to do. And these 3 landscape magazines are also a great way to first share with them if you are planning to convert to Xeriscape, to share all the benefits that they can get out of it, and also inspire them to implement some of these Xeriscape maybe in their own yard. So briefly, this is all the things we talked about. Make sure you know the regulations and rules that are pertaining to your HOAs. And it's really important also to start with the water conservation program or practice that really suits your HOA. Some may not suit some, and others may be better for your HOAs. So see what better for you, and that would take you. And maybe you can gather all these savings, and whenever you have the saving, you can implement another program. Again, I'll stress how important it is to choose landscapers that know how they're doing. Certified arborists or certified landscapers really are the way to go to make sure that your plants are maintained in the most efficient way. And of course, inspire residents and inspire your community to be water conservation champions. That's always great. So thank you very much for joining us. And if you have any questions or if you have any examples that you want to share with us, I'll be happy to hear.
I know it would vary depending on the plants, but do you have any sort of a standard number of what it costs to convert, say, a half an acre of land from turf to Xeriscape?
You know, unfortunately, I don't, but your city would have this information, especially if they offer rebates and such. And if you want, let me actually, you can pick up my card, and that's for everybody. If you have any questions about conservation and anything, my card is in the front. You can pick it up, and I can figure that out for you, at least. Where do you live, around Phoenix area? Scottsdale, okay, so I can figure out specifically for your area. And Scottsdale actually do offer a rebate. I believe it's $3,000 to convert, so that help to mitigate some of these costs. Anybody has any other questions about conservation or HOA regulations?